Yasmina. Good evening, everyone. Godfold Otsamul och tack för att vara med och idag. Tau som hingad kommer eller tau som streami. Toxie Stjórnvísi. And this event is going to be in English because we want it to be inclusive for our new Icelanders. And so let's start. Thank you once again for coming, our esteemed keynote speakers, President Hatla Thomasdottir, the Minister for Social Affairs, he's on his way, for Social Affairs and Labor Market, and our esteemed panelists and honorable guests. Thank you. My name is Grace Achieng, and I'm the founder and CEO of Gracelandic, which is a sustainable women's clothing brand. So at Gracelandic, we believe that fashion is more than just what you wear, it's the impact that you create. Our brand symbolizes empowerment, sustainability, and a vision to create positive change. For more information about Gracelandic, you can visit gracelandic.com. For this eco-conference, it's a groundbreaking event that we plan to have annually, and it's under our social impact initiatives focused on fostering innovation through sustainability, diversity and inclusion in entrepreneurship and the labor market across Iceland. Embracing diversity and fostering inclusion is not just the right thing to do. It's a strategic advantage that fuels innovation, enhances decision-making, and propels organizations towards sustained success in an ever-changing world. Diverse perspectives lead to creative solutions and sustainable practices that benefit the entire community. Advocating for the fair and equal treatment of all individuals, regardless of their background, is a pillar for effective social integration and sustainable prosperity. Thus, by echoing these principles, we reinforce the importance of human rights and the need for policies that protect and effectively empower the most vulnerable. Usually, we fail to reconcile the connection between climate change and human rights, and that is something that we want you to be more aware about when you, with your purchasing decisions. The Eco Conference is a safe space to amplify the voices of those who are often unheard, discuss sustainability, diversity, and inclusion. And this echoes the core values of justice, human rights protection, and the mission of Gracelandic, ultimately fostering a sustainable and innovative future for Iceland. Language is a big aspect of inclusion, and I wrote my thesis on language inclusion and Icelandic teaching of immigrants in the labor market. You can find that on Skeman.ris. Another big aspect of integration is if we don't take care of the issues now, we are going to have situations that are in certain Nordic countries. Like I think in Sweden they have segregated cities, and if we don't take care of the root cause right now, the root problem, if we don't take care of the immigrants, then we're going to have much bigger problems in the future. And I really hope that we can figure something out before things get out of control. So my thesis was based on the Swedish, was in comparison with the Finnish integration policy, because it was relatively new in comparison with other Nordic countries. It can be said that their integration policy is based on principles of equality, inclusive society, and emphasizes the importance of language learning, employment, education, and social integration of immigrants, and pushes away poverty among them. Further emphasis is placed on increasing the number of immigrants among university students and ensuring that previous studies of their previous studies and their degrees of higher education of immigrants are identified and recognized as soon as possible in accordance with national practices. All in all, language inclusion and Icelandic language teaching of immigrants in the labor market calls for the need to introduce an integration policy in Iceland, and as is customary to other Nordic countries. And this is extremely important for the people, the economy, and especially the Icelandic language. In case we have any potential investors here, online or future investors, this is for you. We are excited to invite you to be part of our journey towards creating a sustainable and impactful future. While we are driven by our mission to make a positive social impact, we also understand the importance of financial return. Our business model is designed to deliver strong financial performance, ensuring that your investment yields substantial returns while making a meaningful difference. Well, we call upon you to be part of our visionary team. By investing in Gracelandic, you'll become a catalyst for positive change, and together we can save our planet to protect the people and embark on our eco-friendly, rewarding businesses. And I just wanted to highlight some of our Gracelandic employees. We have Keinde Kayode, who is our startup growth and business operations expert. Keinde, if you could just, where are you, Keinde? She's not here, but...
She's working.
Yeah, we have Keinde, yeah. And we also have Feven Abraham, who is our impact expert. If you can just come and wave. And yeah. So as much as we really want to keep things on schedule as we planned it. However, we also have models at the back, and we fear that if we start with the schedule, then they might just be stuck at the back. And if you don't mind that we just change like a 5 minutes, have a 5-minute change, and we can just have them start, and then yeah, okay. So I just want to thank you so much, everyone, and let the Keinde and Abraham, yeah. So Keinde has been a big part of this process, and I don't know if you want to say a few words, Keinde, because I cannot let you not have a word for, you've been, yeah. Yeah.
Distinguished guests, thank you so much for coming here today. I'm really honored to be a part of this. As an immigrant in Iceland, being able to participate in the corporate world might be sometimes a difficult issue, and that's why we're having this conference to bring together not just immigrants, but also Icelanders to discuss these crucial issues in inclusion, diversity, sustainability, and as well as how everybody can contribute things in their capacity to make Iceland better and even the world beyond. We're really honored. I mean, I don't know I was going to be talking, so I'm a bit shaky. But I hope that this is a good space for everyone to, engage one another and, be welcomed, not just as immigrants, but as much as we are individuals who are living together to make the world better. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay. On that note, we want to welcome our first keynote speaker, the President of Iceland, Halla Tómasdóttir. I just want to say a few words before. We want to note that the President of Iceland is a trailblazing leader, renowned for her leadership, vision, and unwavering commitment to diversity and inclusion, sustainability, innovation, and gender equality in Iceland and beyond. Notably, she was top of Reuters' list of 20 trailblazing women in climate on International Women's Day. Without further ado, welcome.
Thank you. Beautiful. Wow. Congratulations, Grace and team. What a warm start to our conference. Right? We should start every conference with this. And the music that we just had, I almost don't want to speak about hard issues after that soft music and that soft start. What an honor it is to be here with you today. And thank you, I mean it sincerely, Grace and your entire team and team of supporters for your leadership on this front. It's very important. I'm going to try to have a written speech, but I will tell you a funny story first, because Mummi and I've been the minister in Iceland. I am Halla, he is Mummi, for those of you who are not used to it. So we were just at another event in Reykjanesbær, and I couldn't see my speech. You didn't know that, which is why I had to leave it behind. And then he felt so bad because he was speaking after me, because I didn't have the right glasses. And so he decided to speak without paper, and actually without his tooth, but I will leave that story to him to repeat. But it seems we are on the speaking circuit today, and that's nice that we're actually talking about inclusion everywhere we have been today. And I am actually certain, and I think those of you who know me or know anything about me know that I have long been a champion for inclusion, diversity, and entrepreneurship in general. And I actually can't separate those two, but it wasn't maybe until 6 years ago or so that I started to understand that inclusion is actually the key to entrepreneurship, the key to a livable society, the key to the well-being of people and planet. So inclusion is not a nice to do, it is an essential. So, as you know, I do currently serve as president, but I actually think about myself as an entrepreneur. That's who I am at heart. And I actually think I am an entrepreneurial president, or at least I hope to be, because I think there is so much that we need to address and change in today's world. And I have long been on a quest to try to make the world a better place. So, Grace, I mean it, and I think you know it already, that I share and support Grace Landik's mission, and I actually believe that fashion and entrepreneurship and business in general can and should be a force for positive impact in the world. Because the world needs solutions to so many great challenges. And how in the world could we think about being entrepreneurs or business leaders, which at the heart of that is solving problems, without thinking about the impact that we make? I don't even understand it. I don't understand how you can be an entrepreneur or in business and not think about the impact you're making. I actually think that comes first, and from that comes economic and financial profit. That's how I think about it. And in my previous role as the CEO of the B team, where I worked globally with business leaders who were trying to make business a force for good, I frequently brought together CEOs of different industries, not just to try to think about their individual companies and how they could make a difference, but how the whole ecosystem around them could work together to make a difference. And I actually think this is the new model, which is why I also welcome that you're bringing together different people in the ecosystem today to have this conversation. I think we all have a role: business, entrepreneurs, society, government, and all of us. We have a very important role. And a couple of the B team leaders that I worked with, just to give you one example, founded something called the Fashion Pact. And it's actually the largest CEO-led initiative for sustainability in the fashion industry. Every Fashion Pact member is committed to working towards their shared vision for a nature-positive, net-zero future for fashion. And they work together as one, pre-competitively, to create meaningful large-scale change to help improve the industry. Members in the Fashion Pact include, to name just a few, Adidas, Bestseller, H&M, Kering, Nike, and Prada. And if these big companies think they need to be working on sustainability, how could any company in fashion not be thinking about it? The difference, however, is that, well, one of the things that I really welcome in that initiative is that they partner extensively with academia, with governments and nonprofits to progress projects that range from securing renewable energy to accessing lower impact materials and production methods and so on and so forth. But they need the entire ecosystem to do this. And these giant fashion companies are working hard on transforming themselves and their industry, but they face challenges that I think entrepreneurial companies and innovative companies do not. They need to change themselves, and change is hard when you're big. But if you can found a new company and already embedded in your DNA that inclusion and sustainability are essential principles today, it's a very different ballgame. And all of these big, giant companies, global brands, are working on finding partners and suppliers that are sustainable and inclusive. They're actually starting to measure it and disclose it in their financial accounts. So this is a huge business opportunity. And while I think it's also the right thing to do, I think we always need to talk about the business case as well, as Grace just did. So these are legacy companies, but innovative companies, and particularly here in Iceland, should be able to think about these principles from the get-go. I believe entrepreneurship is about creating future-fit companies, and I believe governments should align all of their incentives with that goal, because we need companies that are future fit, that are solving challenges so that the future is brighter. And I believe investors, because I think I saw at least a couple here in the room, that want to have returns for the long term should prioritize investing in such companies. I've never understood why you would invest with a different lens, unless you're just a short-term investor. The business case is so clear. An inclusive company experiences higher productivity, greater creativity and innovation. All of you in the Innovation House know this. Inclusive companies are increasingly the preferred choice for talent and customers, and they experience higher retention rates of both. So simply put, very simply put, diverse teams outperform when it comes to engagement, loyalty, and profitability. These may all be known facts, but money isn't following this formula, so something in the system is broken. And when it comes to sustainability efforts addressing the climate and nature crisis in general, we already know from research that women, alongside young people, from the front lines to the boardroom, not only put these challenges on the agenda, but seek solutions that are both just and sustainable. And so we need them. But women founders, women startup founders, are still a rarity in Europe. They represent more than half the population, women that is, but less than a third of entrepreneurs. So we can still and need to do better. And when women do create a startup, they have trouble getting funding. In 2021, female founders pulled in a fraction of all venture capital investment, or mere 1%. 1%. The number isn't much better across the Atlantic, where the number was 2%, the smallest since 2016. I founded an investment company in 2007, and at the time, women and people of color managed less than 2% of all the capital in the world. We haven't come anywhere in all those years, and yet the business case is so clear. So while I know gender is far from the only dimension of inclusion, there are so many other dimensions, and I want to think about diversity in the broadest sense. I talk about gender because I am particularly passionate about it, and I fought long for it, and I am convinced that a gender-balanced world will be an inclusive world for all, because that is what women, and in particular women of color, who have that double-lived reality bring to the table. And I'm pretty sure a world where we have greater balance in how the capital flows and who are the entrepreneurs and who sits in the boardroom is a world where we are far more likely to practice business and entrepreneurship with greater care for both people and the planet. My own experience and ample academic evidence has led me to believe that women may actually hold the key to a livable world and also be the smartest economic future policy. Female-founded companies deliver twice as much revenue per dollar invested, an investment case that's hard to ignore, yet is largely ignored. Women leaders at the European Investment Bank argued a couple of years ago that locking women out of economic opportunities, either by not supporting their businesses or by ignoring their ideas and experience, weighs on overall economic performance and limits the innovation we need to tackle big problems in the world like climate change. I agree. And I believe Iceland may be particularly well positioned to show the way when it comes to inclusive and sustainable entrepreneurship. We are creative, and we're an entrepreneurial nation at heart. And we already lead the world in closing the gender gap and have proven to be global leaders in geothermal and renewable energy. So aligning incentives, investment capital, talent, and ecosystem support with those strengths that we already hold in Iceland is, in my view, a powerful and strategic policy for continued economic and social progress in Iceland. Dear friends, may we go from strength to strength, starting with a robust dialogue here today. Thank you, be brave, stay strong, and be the change we want to see in the world.
Okay, for our next panel speaker, before we introduce, we want to introduce one of our dear friends of Gracelandic to introduce him. But I want to just say one thing. I remember quite well when we were at the United Nations General Assembly in March, and I remember quite well he was very adamant that we should move from pay equality to pay equality to pay equity. And that is something that was was very notable, and I'm so grateful that you put your voice in there so strongly. So, and one more thing that I want to say about Hatla as well is, I remember the first time that I met you. You were speaking at the international. It was on the International Women's Day on the Icelandic Stock Exchange. Yes, and I just remember you standing there, and there was just this light about you, and there was just something so lovely about you, and everybody was like, "Can I take a photo?" I just ran to you, and I was just like, "She has this light. You are amazing. You are awesome." I don't know, I was fangirling before she became the president, so I'm quite happy that I got to vote for her. So I would like to introduce our friend Jasmina Vajzovic to come and introduce the next keynote speaker. Thank you.
Can I have the paper, Grace? Please. Because we are going to spare the paper, so we are not going to print a lot of paper, so I'm going to use the same one. But thank you, Grace. Thank you, Hatla. It's nice to meet you again, and thank you, Grace, for inviting me to be part of this conference also, and speak and introduce next Grace's friend. I think so, because she was asking me how can we get the Minister of Social Affairs to come to be here today, and I just put some contacts and find that out. So definitely Grace is amazing person and doing very good things. So I needed to say that, Grace. Sorry, but you are lovely. And she is my friend, so I'm just helping her today. So it's not about me. We welcome a dear friend, like I said, Minister of Social Affairs of Labour and Labour Market, Guðmundur. We call him Mummi. That I hear a lot, because sometimes you say by yourself that your name is Mummi. So definitely. He is driving social equality, like Grace said a couple of minutes ago, and sustainable development and innovation, a labor policy in Iceland also. And I also like to say that Mummi is the first minister that she's actually working on the policy of immigrants. So it's definitely something that it's very important to mention this today, because I know a lot of immigrants are here, and policy is very important for us also to see the different in the future. So, gjör svo vel. Welcome.
Glasses. Tooth is in the pocket. Will not show. All right. So it's a great pleasure to be with all of you here today. And Grace, thank you so much for inviting me. I was thinking when I was being introduced, and you were saying how you contacted me and got me to get my ass over here. I have no idea how that happened. I just saw that Grace was asking for a keynote, and I thought, well, I met Grace briefly in New York, and I must say that she moves people. So I think that it must be really interesting to come to an event like this, just to experience the atmosphere, etc. And I'll tell you one atmosphere story later in my very long speech. Now, obviously, it's a pleasure and privilege to speak here, because we are speaking about something that is not only very dear to me and all of us, but also extremely important. Sustainable future, basically, is what we are talking about here. How we can empower society for a change towards sustainability. You know what? It's far away enough. I don't need to have glasses. That's interesting. I'm still getting used to these. That's really interesting. Oh. And I think that today, more than ever, Iceland stands at a crossroads. And I know this is a word that politicians use a lot. So when you write that, you have to mean it, in my opinion at least. But it is crossroads where the principles of inclusion, of diversity and national identity can really sort of guide us towards a more innovative and sustainable society. And the reason why we need a sustainable society, I'm not going to go into that. A lot of books have been written about that. A lot of facts are showing us that. We have university degrees that are about that. But still we have disbelievers, and that sort of amazes me, that we still have people that believe that we don't really need to think about these things, that we can just go about our daily lives as ever before. I disagree on that, but anyways. As has been pointed out here, there's a lot of immigrants in this room, but it's also a mix. And that is, I think, a very important part of building what we want to build here in Iceland. We are becoming more and more diverse every year. We have grown, the immigrant population has grown from 8% in 2012 up to 18% today. And that is the largest growth that we are seeing in any of the OECD countries. And yet, we don't have a policy on immigration, like you pointed out. So to me, that was one of the most important things that I could do when it comes to issues of immigrants, is to have such a policy written with a lot of people. And when you do these things often, you create a steering committee, yes, a steering committee. And I remember we were going through this in the ministry. So who should be on that committee? And we always added more and more and more representatives of different groups. And what did we end up with? 20, 25 people? 20 people. And that is considered absolutely crazy, because it's so difficult to get something out of a group of 20 people, you know what I mean? It's sometimes said that a group of 3 is likely to get things done. Group of 5, group of 7, no more than 7. But still, after a group of 20 people visiting all parts of the country, talking to over 500 people about their aspirations and what they want to see, in particular immigrants, we now are almost there. And I will take this policy with an action plan for the next 4 years, a policy for the next 15 years, an action plan for the next 4 years into the parliament in November. And I'm quite positive that this policy will be well received. Now, like Halla was saying, what is in the speech and what is not. That is always the trick, to be or not to be. Anyways, guys, I will just shorten the speech then. Will not stand here all day, mostly because I need to be somewhere else later tonight. Otherwise, I would love to talk all night. No, I'm kidding. But I just think that our message needs to be very clear, that anyone can belong in Iceland. I mean, that's number one. And that discrimination has no place. I mean, be it in terms of gender expression, ethnicity, nationality, sexual orientation, disability, or any other traditional markers by background. And it's important not only for the people who traditionally have been and are still being discriminated against, it's also important for society, because we lose out talents. And that's not good. There is one, in my opinion, powerful truth that we must embrace, and that is that diversity breeds innovation. And Halla talked about that. We are seeing that here today. So we need people from varied experiences and culture to collaborate, and new ideas will and are emerging because of that. I want to tell you, last week I was in Copenhagen. There are things when you're a minister that are fun, and then there are things that are not fun. But one of the things that is keeping my heart a little bit alive, at least for the last week, has been that I went to Copenhagen last week to give out a prize, which is called the Nordic Pioneer Prize. And that is giving out to people who have fostered and helped in emerging coming up with different methods to get people of different backgrounds together to create basically something beautiful. And there was one of the 4 prize winners, a guy from Turku in Finland, who is doing similar things to what is being done here. So maybe you're the next winner of that prize. Who knows? And he is using fashion to bring people together of different backgrounds. And he says, and he has shown that it breaks down barriers. People start talking. People start basically respecting one another much more. Okay. I wanted to say a lot about fashion and how important fashion is for sustainability. One of the things that those of us who have been a little bit in the sustainability business, if I may put it that way, I'm an environmentalist and I studied environmental science back in the day. There is a sort of a growing part of the sustainability movement that has to do with fashion, design, and arts. And I just want to say that sometimes I think we forget ourselves a little bit in numbers and graphs and stuff like that, whereas this is really where things are boiling, and this is influencing our perception of change. And instead of going through the rest of my speech, anyways, it's going down on the floor, I will just say that I am really honored to have had the opportunity to speak here today, but mostly to experience the atmosphere here. And I tell you, when I was in Copenhagen last week, the atmosphere in that room was so powerful, because it was young people who were getting these awards, and they were empowered by a lot of other people who were working with them. And that sort of energy was in that room, and I feel that energy here as well. So keep up that energy and continue doing great things, and then perhaps it will all be all right. With or without the tooth? I'm going to put the tooth in. I'm going to put the tooth in.
You can take one. But all of us? Oh, sorry. Because he's so friendly that sometimes I forget he's the minister. And I'm just
I'm on without the tooth? No.
Okay, so I'm going to take one with you.
You're going to be known as the tooth fairy now.
Thank you so much.
So on that note, on the name, about this name Mumi, I actually had this name when we were in New York, and I was in denial that you would call a minister Mumi, and he said, and everyone was like, yeah, that's what he says his name is Mumi, and I met him, and he's so nice, and now I can call him Mumi, you know, and I called my friend in Kenya, because in Kenya the minister is the Honorable, His Excellency, and all these things, and I called my friend. I was like, I met this minister, and he was so nice, and he said everybody calls him Mumi by his short name, and she couldn't wrap her head around it. So, and I don't know if you've heard, like some time back after I wrote my language thesis, my Icelandic language thesis on language inclusion and integration of language inclusion and teaching of Icelandic to immigrants, the labor market. I actually visited the ministry, and I talked to Aushildur Linet and a few other people. And if you don't mind, we would like to follow up. We would like to have like a follow-up meeting with you, Mumi. So we can just set it up, and and we would be honored if you would give us a moment of your time. Yeah. Okay, so now we will go to the panelists. And for our panelists, I'm going to invite Laura Johansdottir, who is the MBA and has an MBA, and she's a professor at the University of Iceland and academic director of the Environment and Natural Resources graduate program. She's actually my professor, and I invited her because I want to get good grades. No? No. Yeah, so I'm taking a master's degree in environmental and natural sciences, but I really wanted Laura to come because she's a rock star within the faculty, and when she said yes, I couldn't believe it. I went out and did a jumping jacks, you know, because that's my happy dance. I mean, anyone else? Just me? Okay. Okay, Laura, we would like to invite you to come to the front for here the seats, and and I will welcome Randy Stephens, who is the facilitator of the event, and you can do it.
You've been up here a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. The panelists, you know who you are if you just want to come up while I'm setting up. I have a much more informal style of facilitation, which I warned you all coming into this. But I do want to start by thanking Grace and Kenny for inviting me to facilitate. Facilitating is one of the great joys in my life. And like many immigrants, when I came here, I had to leave some of my joys behind in order to embrace other things. And so it's always just lovely for me to be able to facilitate, especially these kinds of conversations, because that's my specialty, is really just facilitating sometimes what can be challenging or deep or difficult conversations. And you were introduced, Laura, so nicely, so you were first on my list, but I'm just gonna skip over you, but like really no offense for that one. The next person I'd like to introduce who's joining us today is Heidrun Sigfúsdóttir. Heidrun in the lovely jacket. For those of you who don't know Heidrun, and she and I were recently introduced through a mutual friend, Paula, she is the CEO and co-founder of CakeCut, an AI-powered styling company for online retail, which I believe also uses this space for your like offices and such. Yeah. Heidrun began her career managing a department within R&D at one of the world's largest orthopedic companies. She then went on to co-found a sustainable fashion brand that had their garments sold in stores and online marketplaces. With a focus on innovation and relentless perseverance, which is a fabulous word, by the way. I love those words. Perseverance, Heidrun thrives in leadership and building ventures driven by creative problem solving. Heidrun's experience spans sales, marketing, event planning, grant writing, operations, and technology project management. As the founder of CakeCut, Heidrun leads the mission of reducing global retail waste while helping shoppers discover their perfect wardrobe. Welcome, Heidrun. Next on my list is Catherine Gunnarsson. Catherine is the co-founder of Gecko and has been making a big impact in Iceland's tech and innovation scenes since moving here in 2016. Which, if you're an immigrant, you know we always talk about when we came here. So you're like 2 years younger than I am. With strong focus on talent and people strategy, as well as creative, inclusive workplace cultures, she's been helping companies grow and thrive. Gecko, which Catherine started in 2020, is all about her passion for putting people first. She has worked with over 100 companies in Iceland, including some of the most innovative and forward-thinking ones like Treble Technologies, Lucenti, AwareGo, Snurpa Power, Captio, Controlent, and many more, helping them to build strong teams and develop their people strategies. It's not just about the strategies for Catherine and her team, they're all about making real change happen. They run workshops and give talks to help organizations truly understand the importance of inclusivity at work, the importance of creating equal opportunities for all, and Catherine is especially passionate about ensuring that everyone feels a true sense of belonging in the workplace. At the heart of Catherine's work is a simple goal: to create workplaces where diversity is celebrated, inclusivity is the norm, and everyone feels valued and supported. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you. Is that me?
Yeah, I feel the same when I'm writing my bio, and I'm just like, this just sounds like utter nonsense. But yes, it is you, Catherine. I know I've known you for a while now, and I can say this is you. Next on my list is Jeffrey Guarino. Did I pronounce that correctly? Close. Okay, so tell me. Guarino. Okay, beautiful. Jeffrey is a versatile photographer, creative director, and producer with an extensive portfolio that spans multiple facets of visual storytelling. From music videos to photo shoots to podcasts and television projects, Jeffrey has continuously pushed creative boundaries through diverse and impactful collaborations. As the host and producer of the podcast Work in Progress on Smástoðin, Jeffrey worked alongside co-host Sante Feaster to interview business leaders, artists, and talented individuals from various countries who were integrating into Icelandic life. The platform showcased inspiring stories of creativity and adaptation, offering a unique perspective on the challenges and opportunities faced by newcomers to Iceland. In addition to podcasting, Jeffrey served as creative director, advisor, and executive producer of Argo Media's Travelpolitans. That's a good name. I like it.
That wasn't my idea.
Yeah, good job. A project that spotlighted tourists as they interacted with local Icelandic businesses and the passionate entrepreneurs behind them. From whiskey distilleries to 4x4 adventure tours, the project highlighted how personal stories and cultural exchange shaped Iceland's entrepreneurial landscape, a true privilege for Jeffrey to help bring to life. While diverse in their creative pursuits, photography remains Jeffrey's central passion. Working with artists and brands has been both fulfilling and inspiring, allowing Jeffrey to capture powerful visuals that speak to the heart of human experience and creativity. Freyr is last on the list. Wait, did you guys, no, I'm like, did you guys sit in order by chance? But no, I'm like, what's happening here? Freyr is the executive director of digital product development at Íslandsbanki. Through his career as an executive, a coach, a leader, and advisor, he has developed a deep commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which somebody asked me what DEIB means. So if we use that word and you're not familiar with it, it's an acronym that means diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging. So the B is the belonging part. His fundamental belief is that he has the responsibility to use his platform of privilege to be active and visible, raise awareness, and awaken others like him through the power of allyships. Please welcome our panel. All right, so I know you all got a long list of questions because I sent them to you before we met, but I usually facilitate these as more of a free-flowing discussion, and this was just to make sure that you felt comfortable with the topic, and that I also knew a little bit about you. Oh, I'm supposed to get closer to the mic? Oh, you're supposed to use the mics. Okay, you want to pass them out? There are four that we can pass between. I assume this is for the live stream, because I'm hecka loud and I'm sure everybody can hear me in this room without a problem. Okay. And the title or the theme of today is Social Economic Empowerment for Sustainability in Iceland, Fostering Innovation Through Inclusion, Diversity, and National Identity. So that's sort of the theme that we're thinking about, the theme that our previous speakers, Hatla Mumi, spoke about. But what I'm really wanting to start off with, because you all bring such a diversity of backgrounds and lived experiences and just interests and all of these things to us today, I just want to start out with the concept of sustainability, right? Or sustainable, or however you want to think about it. Because the word, and as a word nerd in case you noticed, is both almost infinitely broad and infinitely narrow, right? Depending on how it's used, in what context. And certainly I'm always conscious of time, just so you know. So I'm going to be checking my phone for the time. I swear I am not checking social media. You know, and I think in today's world, it is a rather narrow understanding of the word, but it is broadening, in my opinion, over time. And so what I'd like to start out with is just from your own experiences, background, thoughts, opinions, what does sustainability mean? And for this, I'm going to start with Lara.
Thank you.
Are we on?
Yeah. Hello. Do you hear me? Yes? Okay. So from my point of view, I would say that sustainable development or sustainability is, you have to stay within the planetary boundaries and health, and also that we need to focus on strong sustainability. And strong sustainability means that the environment comes first, then we have the social aspect, and then we have the economy and the financial aspect. So that is, we have to stay within the planetary boundaries on this journey.
Okay, thank you. So you're really thinking of it as a three-tiered way.
Yeah, but
first environmental,
yeah.
next social, and third economic.
Yes.
So that's an interesting concept, and I want to wrap back around to this, but I want other people to be able to weigh in about their thoughts about sustainability, and it's always fine to say pass. So Jeffrey, why don't we go to you? What is that word for you?
Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. I never think of sustainability in that way. When I'm thinking of business, in terms of business, I think good ideas sustain themselves. But there are certain things, of course, that are basic when it comes to that. I think sustainability has to do with, in my opinion, being a kind of living thing. I'm a creative person, so I liken it to like a stream. You know, it has a flow to it. You know, if it stagnates too long, then in a business sense, I see that a lot in a lot of businesses. They stop thinking. I've worked for a lot of businesses and companies, and they get to a certain point and they stop, like, thinking. Really, it becomes a routine, and there's no organicness to it. And that's usually when it stagnates. So and I've seen them fail as well. In Iceland, I've worked for a few companies that came up and then failed because they just didn't. They just stopped at a certain point. So when I think of sustainability, I'm thinking more of that flow within it, and I think general. So I'm not. I'm sorry, I'm not that. I'm more of an artistic nature, not the.
You do not need to apologize.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because you're going back to sustainable's core definition of being able to continue, like to continue on or to be able to continue. So I think that's a really interesting perspective, and that core definition sometimes gets lost in our discussions because it gets so narrow to specific fields and specific applications and metrics. Yeah, interesting. That's very interesting. Heidrun, you want to follow up?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, first and foremost, it was for me the natural resources when I'm thinking about sustainability. But I'm also thinking how businesses and individuals, how we prioritize our choices today without compromising next generation's choices. So I think that's very crucial when we are thinking about sustainability, in my opinion.
Nice. Okay. So thinking ahead, not just
Yes,
focusing
exactly.
on
Yeah,
today.
not just being more conscious about the decisions that you are making today, because I'm always thinking it's going to affect the future generation, and that's, I think, also really important for corporations, is to integrate this into every layer of the businesses. So when you're making the choices, you are thinking about resources, a fair trade, reducing waste, transparency in your supply chain. These are the things I think, it's very crucial that companies make goals on what are we going to do and how are we going to do it.
Great. Thank you. Catherine.
Okay, so yeah, a lot of good stuff I'm hearing already, but I definitely agree with the choice. And obviously my speciality is in resources, but human resources. So just making sure that companies are making that choice to make sure that they create very inclusive environments for people to be able to survive and be sustainable in their jobs, and to be able to have choice to think a little bit outside the box, etc. So every company or every person is responsible for the environments that you create at work. So you have to be able to create these very inclusive environments for people to be able to thrive and to, create a future for the company and its people. So yeah, my main thing I always think about is just resources from a people's perspective.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring in the idea of being able to sustain in your job. Can you keep going in your job? What is conducive to that, perhaps, and what is not conducive to that? So that brings an aspect of sustainability that we haven't really brought up yet, though I imagine it would connect into your social side as well. Freya, I'm not forgetting you. Let us know. What do you think about sustainability?
So I actually hadn't thought much about sustainability. So my job, the work that I do has been so much about one-on-one connections and teams and company culture, basically. And but thinking back, when I start to kind of dive a little bit more into it, it's pretty obvious that's all really about figuring out how to build a culture that actually sustains. How does it survive? And I just think you cannot have a sustainable culture if you don't factor in things like inclusion and diversity and equity and belonging. Yeah, I think that's what I want to say.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's interesting. And I know that you're a coach and you work deeply one-on-one with people. But I've also wondered about sustainable relationships, sustainable communities, right? Not communities that work on sustainability. Let me just clarify that. But communities that are sustainable, that last over time and are welcoming, whether it be a work community or other things. Well, thank you for that insight. I think it really brings out the diversity of opinions and insights that we have here. My next question, and as long as you guys promise to like be nice, I won't call you by name like I did that time. But my next question actually pulls on that and what you all touched on about business and sustainability, be it in concepts, you know, Jeffrey, as you were saying, be it in individual relationships, environmental, future, humans, like all of these things. And something Hatle said sort of, and it's something that has puzzled me honestly for a long time, because I am also a lawyer and I know how businesses are constructed. I have actually drawn up papers to construct businesses, and I know what their motivations are and what society, especially capitalist society, tells them their motivation should be. But then Hatle says, you know, business as a force for good. And I'm sorry, I almost laughed. You know, I almost laughed, which would have been really rude, but I am deeply, deeply skeptical about this messaging, you know, much less as a concept that can be put into action. And so I really want to spin off of that thought and the thoughts that you all brought up. What do you think? Is it possible, given the profit motive, activist shareholders, you know, all and having to meet your financial responsibilities for your investors and the intense amount of pressure, which in my opinion will always override any other pressure in the world, but I would be happy to be wrong. You know, this is one of the things where please prove me wrong. Like I voted today, you know, and in the United States, and I have always said there will not be a female president in my lifetime, and I really hope I'm wrong. Like I voted today hoping that I'm wrong. So please feel free to prove me wrong. Do you think businesses can ever be a force for good in any sustainability aspect that you brought up, or in any way? Jeffrey, you grabbed a mic, so you're on.
Yeah. History. I love history. As a matter of fact, you know, when I came to Iceland, I was just blown away because I grew up reading National Geographic, and the picture I had in my mind of Iceland was like grass houses, and all the women had traditional costumes, and I was so pleasantly surprised that it wasn't exactly like that. But yeah, history, I studied history throughout school and college in the United States, and my other job was in the food industry, and so I studied a lot about the changes in the food industry. And as we all know, especially me being from the United States, I saw a big difference in, I'll just relate it to food, in Iceland as opposed to the United States.
Immigrants always related to food.
Yeah. Food is like a great topic, right? The United States started deregulating like crazy, and business had a huge influence on how we ate. And for most Icelandic people here, if you ever gone to the States, you understand what I'm talking about. You order something and you get like, this is your plate. And so, you know, if you study history, if you look at history of businesses and the balance between people and businesses, it's really easy to see like where we are at this time. We're almost going backwards. And there's a clear definition. Like you said, you voted today. I never thought I'd see a female president either, and I hope that happens.
I'm almost afraid to hope, to be honest, but that's another discussion.
But back to the history, I think the looking at the history really tells us a lot of what we need to know, because a lot of what's being done now has already been done. There's a lot of monopoly behavior and things like this. When you have that lack of diversity, it stagnates. You see that like in companies like IBM and whatnot, and their ideas stagnate. And the companies that always seemed to do better were the ones who were willing to see differently. I mean, that's Steve Jobs' motto, you know. And so I think history is a teacher that we often overlook. And if we just stop and just take a look, we can see the pitfalls that have already happened and avoid them altogether if we're smart. And with businesses, the model is growth, growth, growth. And I worked for a particular company that's no longer existing in Iceland, where I sat in management meetings, and it was hard to have a conversation with the owners about what I was seeing. And I was seeing the end of the road. And they were seeing tomorrow. And they just didn't understand their relationship with their customers. And it was like profit, 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 profit. And there's like, all right, but there was no idea of sustainability. That's number one. And if they understood anything about history, businesses in life in general, nothing continually goes up.
It's like a,
you know,
hopefully an upward spiral if you're lucky.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just.
Catherine, you also grabbed a microphone, so I feel like you're eager.
I am indeed. I mean, I'm just, so, you know, we've always got to think about the businesses, even though we like to think that they, you know, especially here in Iceland, we have these flat structures. Of course, people all have their own purpose about why they work and why they come to work. And it's about recognizing that as part of the culture. And we focus far too much on leaders having to, you know, be the ones that are putting the culture in our workplaces. But every single person who works for a company is responsible for the culture that we bring in. So if you're creating these, you know, we've talked a lot about community in sustainability, and if you're creating a community vibe set on values that, you know, that the people have brought together and set these norms and principles of how they work together, then they're going to have a very different purpose, maybe to the stakeholders or, you know, the people who are making the big bucks, etc. But you can still create this community value. All too often we hear startups talking about, oh, we're like a family. No company is like a family. You do not treat your your workmates as you do your family. You have very different values to how you work with your teammates. I'd like to think so anyway. And in fact, not everybody has a great relationship with their family. So if you're inviting people into this family community, you're actually going to miss out on a lot of good talent. So, you know, we have to create these really amazing community values that everybody has a voice, where everybody can bring their unique selves to work. And you know, that's just one way in which companies can, you know, you're never going to have everybody being huge stakeholders in companies. That's just not going to be the way. But there are ways in which you can create purpose for each and every individual that works at a company. And that is just by making sure that everybody has a voice, they can bring their unique self to work, and that we create these diverse teams. As Hatla was saying, with diverse teams, we have increased productivity, we have increased engagement, we have increased happiness. That actually affects the bottom line. And far too many of the leaders don't recognize that by creating these diverse teams, it's actually going to have a huge benefit on their companies. So, yeah, I'm very passionate about this, as you can hear.
I do want to get to you because I know you're in corporate social responsibility. But I just want to say, like, this constant having to justify ourselves according to the bottom line, in my opinion, is part of the problem. We're still playing the game by their rules. We're still playing the late capitalist dance of, if we don't quantify it in monetary terms, and this whole thing, it's only real if it's measurable, really makes me ill. But, you know, I feel like, and I've been on many of these panels and I've discussed this, like, it's hard, and I know when you're talking to a certain audience, it's a language you have to use, but it's always fascinated me that we use this capitalist language to justify our very existence, you know, and I think that's part of the thorniness of the issue.
We all have our own purpose, and that's not always monetary driven. So by leaders recognizing what the purpose of, you know, the individuals are, you can create this community where everybody has a different purpose, but you're all working towards the same vision. And that's what we're missing out on.
Well, solidly, I admit we all need money to live. Like, I'm not, you know, I admit that.
Definitely
but Laura,
in Iceland.
Why don't you chime in?
Yes, thank you. So, yes, I am actually building this on a study that I conducted, interviewing like 80 people, executives and experts, on the topic in the Nordic region. And I came up with a framework. And the framework is called the 5C framework. There are it's about commitment, configuration, core business, communication, and continuous improvements. But the companies actually need to know what are the driving forces, both internal forces and external, because it's not just about internal forces, such as the business case, but of course the business case is important, but there are also in some cases ethical motivations. It's the right thing to do, but there are also a lot of external drivers that can actually put companies out of business if they are not recognizing these external forces. And we have seen companies losing the social license to operate and go bankrupt. So that is also one thing. But in terms of these 5 C's, one is the commitment. It is also about the leadership, but I fully agree with what you're saying. But if there's not a support from the top, not much will happen. So that is also one thing. But configuration is about the structural changes within the company or an industry. Meaning how the corporate governance looks like, what policies and code of conducts are in place, and so forth and so on. And also the indicators that are selected and so forth. Because even like in case of businesses, they might measure CO2 emissions per employees, per unit of something. But if we are not reducing, for instance, emissions in absolute terms, then we are not dealing with the issue. However, the model brings something that I didn't find in the literature at this time, and that is the focus on the core business. Each company has to focus on its core business. If you don't recognize what your core business is, then you are doing something that is minor. So the core business, for instance, if you're an aviation or if you're a shipping company, and you are just sorting the waste, that is of course good thing, but if you're not focusing on how to run the airplanes or how to run the ships, moving people or products from A to B, then you're not focusing on where you make the most impact. So that's another thing. And then I have also in this communication, this is about engaging with stakeholders, this is about reporting and transparency and all these aspects. And since I used to work as a quality manager within the insurance sector, it's also about continuous improvement because we are not there yet.
Thank you.
Can I add here?
Please do.
Because I think this is also very interesting from the perspective of when you start a company. Are you starting a company to make a profit, to think about, what's the primary goal? And I think that's the core of the business, is why do you start? And for us, for example, we wanted to make a difference. We wanted to reduce waste. So that's basically everything we do, we are working towards that core of how do we do that. And making money is something we need to do on the way towards our core. So I think this is, what is it that, is the core value of the business? Why do you start? What do you want to do?
Freyr, did you want to chime in before we shift just a little bit?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on, so you said, why do we have to always justify ourselves in the system? And coming back to something that Halla said about, so the business case is clear for diversity and equity inclusion. But those things kind of go together, like, leaning into the business case is accepting that we have to justify ourselves. Because we're saying the business case is the reason that we do this, not because it's the right thing to do. And I have seen, I remember reading an article, reading research where somebody, where they placed a tested an employment ad that described what was the reason for the company focusing on DE&I. Was it because of business, or was it because it was the right thing to do? And people overwhelmingly preferred the right thing to do, right? That's what people want. But if there's anything that I've learned from my work is that behavior follows structure, and so if the structure of the company, of the shareholders and everything is set up in that way, then behavior will ultimately follow. I think that's what you were kind of getting at with the original question. If you, so I think it ultimately comes down to just stacking, the people that think in the same way in key positions. You fill your board with the people that are ready to sacrifice monetary gain for this. or you get a strong enough CEO that is able to push the justification aspect only into his interaction with the board, and so that the whole company doesn't have to constantly, every day, justify their actions towards this.
Okay, cool. Actually, I want to spin off of one thing you said, and Jeffrey, something you said as well. That you were in discussions, Jeffrey, where you were talking to company owners, and even though you had the facts in front of you, and I am paraphrasing here, they didn't believe you or they didn't listen to you. And I know it's something that I talk about a lot and research on, and also immigrants in Iceland in general, this idea of belief despite the facts, right? And how strong belief is, and that it can override any fact pretty much, or at least give people a way to fit the fact into their belief system. And I think I would like to touch on that with the idea of Iceland specifically being this purported leader in, gender equality, in environmental issues, in equity in general. If you're aware, this is, called Nordic exceptionalism, and Iceland has its own little spin on it. And we talked about, national identity, and I think this Nordic exceptionalist identity is very deep throughout the Nordics. And it, in my research, in my opinion, stops people from moving forward on very key issues around sustainability, around DEIB. And I just want to throw that out there. And this is also spinning off what Halla said about just solutions. That word, just justice, as a lawyer, I don't believe justice exists in the way that we understand it in the court systems, but I believe it is possible to be just, and so how does that fit into this idea? If we believe so strongly of ourselves that we're already in nirvana, are we forgetting or not seeing the issues that are there and therefore not addressing them? And what would addressing them in a just manner even look like? Jeffrey's on it. I see his eyes just spark. I love that.
It's just clicking. Balance. The thing when I came to Iceland is, how nature was an integral part of, everyone I talked to, and it's not really that way in the States. But it was very enlightening, very nice, and the more I lived here, the more I understood there's a nice balance between, work life and home life. Between being in the city and being in the country, and between being here and traveling. There's a balance that has to take place. Nature teaches us exactly how we need to be. And I like the fact that in Iceland, don't walk over there. We're trying to, keep that. You can't walk over there. And don't drive over there, And I love that. It was passion. It was incorporated into the identity of the place. And it made me look at balance. Coming from the States, I had no balance. I worked a lot. And I never saw my kids, I never saw my family, but I made money, okay? But when I got here, things closed at 5 o'clock. And I was like, what?
And didn't open until 11 o'clock the next
Right?
morning. And where's my early morning shopping hours?
And I grew up in the United States, so it was money. It's like business. Hey, we can stay open to 24/7. And I was and never questioned that. And when I talk to my friends who are professors and lawyers, they work there off in the United States. And when I told them, hey, when my daughter was born, they allowed me to stay home. I could stay home. They're like, what? All my male friends, that's not even fathomable, which is sad to me. But there's the balance between business and that other thing that's not quantifiable, I guess, or metric. And I think that's kind of what's missing. But if you incorporate or try to see where to find it, you might find a solution that you might not have thought of. And when I was talking about the meetings that I was involved in, the manager was he had all the metrics in front of him. And I told him, one of the reasons most of the people are working for him had nothing to do with the metrics. They identified with the company. They were proud of what they were doing. And a lot of them didn't even care. They cared about the money they made, but they're more proud that people, they were involved with a company that they could be proud of. So that was something that wasn't quantifiable. But his way of looking at it was purely from what I would say an imbalanced way. So
Profit maximizing.
yeah.
Who wants to jump in on this? Or I can call people out either way.
I
Heidrun,
can,
go ahead.
yes, I can do that. No, I think also pandemic has taught us a lot there, like how we work in different environments. I mean, you don't have to stay in the office. You can work from home. The flexibility and how we actually bring out the creativity in people, like. And I think that also connects with the balance from, having a family, working with people, having the flexibility to innovate and get new ideas. And as businesses grow, that can get harder. And how are you going to keep that? And that also has to do with inclusivity, bringing together different kinds of people. I think that's really crucial in also innovation, sustainable innovation.
Fred, did you want to, you grab the mic too.
Yeah. So the original question was you mentioned kind of Nordic exceptionalism, and it just got me thinking. So it's just been like about 3 years since I started working in Iceland again. Been in Germany for almost 15 years, for 11 years. And one of the things that I bumped into, so I started working with a software company, and I started noticing that there was literally, nobody was talking about DE&I. Nobody knew what, when I said, do we have any allies? Like, what's an ally?
Yeah.
And so I started to kind of just, get to know people more, and I started to ask women in the workplace, like, what has been your experience? So I spoke with she was probably about 52, been a software engineer her entire life, and I asked her to tell me her story. And she told me her story with very strong words. And one of the things she said, which kind of comes back to, I think maybe what you were kind of getting at is, she mentioned the Equal Pay Act, so the Jafnlaunavottun, right? Which is, it's a good thing that we have that. But she said that tells me to shut up. It tells me I can't complain anymore. Like, it's been solved. Tick. Right? And that was just like so powerful to hear that directly from her. And actually, I hadn't kind of clicked there. And she was that was when she used the strongest words. And I think, if I then want to kind of start talking about that, that's a very prickly subject for a lot of people. And I think a huge part of that connected to actually like Icelandic culture is also just deep conflict avoidance around such topics. And
that's a whole different panel discussion.
Right.
Whole different panel discussion.
Yeah. But yeah, so essentially anytime I wanted to try to kind of touch on that, the topic would kind of just float up into the air and then out the window.
Yeah. So I just want to follow up before I open up. It's the pay gap has actually risen this year. Like, recent statistics were put out, and it's actually risen. I know because we're researching it for a talk, and also because I look at these things. And what I found interesting is there's been almost no discussion around it. Since this Equal Pay Act came in and certification has come in, it's small, but still there, and it's gone up. And if you look across industries, the higher paying industry you are for whatever good that is, the bigger the gap is, and the only time we see what's a negative pay gap, meaning it's in the favor of the women, as if pay gaps are just default in favor of the guys, is in the lowest paid, caregiving sectors, which, as we all know, women are usually shoved to those sectors, especially immigrant women, as well. And also what you said about the pandemic, which I thought was really interesting, Heidrun, because there's really interesting research done during that time showing that this sort of home work-life balance got completely knocked off for women during the pandemic in Iceland. So this is research too in Iceland, where they ended up taking on the lion's share of the home while still being expected to perform at work, whereas Icelandic men were still just focusing on work performance, and to me, this is what I'm talking about You know, and these things don't really get picked up and discussed as much, you know, because they go against, in my opinion, or a lot of it, they go against this national identity, and they're really, really uncomfortable, and this is where the conflict aversion comes in. It's all a big mess. But, you know, just two things that sparked in my head as you were talking is the recent statistics and then the research about that. But Laura and Catherine, I want to give you a chance to chime in as well.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm just going to take this a little bit from the pandemic as well, talking about other things, because we are an island in the middle of Atlantic Ocean, and sometimes we just think about us in isolation. And one of the things that is also critical in terms of sustainability is systems and systemic risk, for instance. So that is just something that I wanted to bring up. And also I was involved in a COVID-related study where we conducted interviews, a lot of interviews in the Westfjords of Iceland. And in that sense, the idea about balance actually came up, and the closeness to nature, and how nature is really important in terms of our physical and mental well-being.
Nice. Catherine?
Yeah, definitely. Just to jump on that, when we did the research last year with for the grant project, we asked 100 just under 200 foreign experts completed some research, and also just over 60 hiring managers, so people who are involved in actually hiring processes. And one of the reasons why people move here, you know, one of the big reasons why they move here was because of safety and nature, etc. The reason for moving here because of job opportunities was very low. So, and that just then reflects in, you know, in actually into companies and how they actually hire here. So just, you know, we're talking here about balance and getting that balance right about, you know, hiring, you know, who we know in the market versus taking that risk, and we are very risk averse here, about taking some risk and actually, you know, looking outside of our normal networks for talent. We have a huge talent pool here in Iceland that, you know, 90% of the people who completed the survey have, you know, bachelor's or master's degrees or PhDs, etc. So 90%, but 71% of people had to take lower skilled jobs when they came to Iceland because they don't get a look in the market, in the job market here. And part of that is, and from the discovery of the research, and again, it was a very small pool, you know, mainly from the tech and innovation space, because that's where, you know, my core network is. But, you know, 70% of the people who completed it said they don't have a CV screening facility. So it is all just human screening. So therefore, we're missing out on this huge talent pool because it's like, oh, I don't know that name, or I don't know where they've worked before, or they've just moved here. I'm not going to consider them because I'm taking a risk. You know, instead of hiring this pool of people who I know their name, I know where they worked last, I can call somebody and ask how they were. So, you know, how they've worked before. And so, and you know, it's just, we have to make systematic change, and companies have to take responsibility for creating some structure. We talk about balance and wanting to be a little bit, you know, flexible and, you know, move and be, but we have to create sustainable workplaces. And in order to do that, we have to have some systems in place and some standards and some structure. And when we're hiring people, when there's no structure in place and there's just this random way of hiring with no structured interviews or way of sifting through CVs or, you know, removing bias at all from the process, then we're always just going to be hiring the same people over and over and again, and that's not sustainable. That's not a balanced society. So we've got to be thinking about all of these ways. And one thing that also came from that, we said, what happens when it's really hard to find talent that you can't find in Iceland? Where do you go? Oh, we look at opening an office overseas, or we look at, you know, using an international hiring agency. And what they're not doing is going, okay, so we've got this network which I've reached out to and I can't find anyone. Now I'm just going to jump over this circle of people who are sat there waiting with very high degrees, amazing, you know, amazing education, that are just sitting there in very low skilled jobs because they haven't got an opportunity. So I know I kind of went around the table a little bit with that one, but just, you know, if we're going to create balance and we're going to create a sustainable society, we have to think about how our teams are hired and how we structure our hiring processes.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just?
Sure.
I'm sorry. Is this
Yeah,
on?
no need to
okay.
apologize.
Again, my experience being an American, I grew up with diversity.
Mm-hmm.
It was just baked in, and I loved it because I learned a lot from many different cultures and just even the work ethic of people. But the one thing that I loved about, and I still love about America and Americans, is their desire to be an American, their desire to contribute. And, you know, having been there and been around immigrants and seen how they work, and, you know, it's the same in most every country. Immigrants are usually holding down the lower positions.
Yep.
And most of them want to give a better life to their children. So they're willing to really dig and do the dirty work. And I think during the pandemic, I mean, I worked in a hospital during the pandemic, and the people that were coming in were the people who were most scared and had a lot to lose, which is the immigrants, the ones who clean the toilets and take care of people, cook the food, and all this kind of stuff. Of course, the doctors and nurses, but the staff that held it down, the floor in which you stand, are usually the immigrant population.
Yep.
And my desire also, when I came here, being an American, you know, it's kind of a weird thing because there's a propaganda about being number one, and I never really understood that, because wherever you are, you think you're number one. Like, you know, if I'm Icelandic, I'm number one. Why am I going to think you're number one? But anyway, the thing is that when I moved here, I felt like an immigrant, and then I became a citizen, and then I voted, and I was very proud. The Madam President was here, and I voted for her, and it just really, I told my mother about it, and I felt different, as if I belonged, as if I contributed something. And when you leave out those populations, and I've met a lot of immigrant people with various degrees who are frustrated because the only thing they really want to do is contribute to the place in which they live and the place in which they love. And maybe they found someone they love who's Icelandic, and that's why they're here, and they want to simply contribute.
But for the love of God, please do not call us trailing spouses. That is one of the most offensive terms I have ever come across in my life.
So it's that, I think, from a business, if you were a business in Iceland, if you ignore a population, it's like if you're fishing from a pool instead of the ocean, you know, it doesn't really make a hell of a lot of sense. And there's a lot of people who really have a passion for this country and want to be a part of it and contribute to it. And to ignore that population, that's not going to be a good way to go. It just doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, I agree, and like Catherine said, well said. It is, you know, in my time here, and I spoke about this very early on, that I see a dual society becoming more and more real in Iceland, where I'm trying to think of a word that's not as strong as the one going through my head. The Icelandic, like, majority society is in one track, and immigrants are in another track, and it's the rare person, and I have to say I'm one of them, who has crossed in those, you know, into those different societies in different ways. And I think it's very dangerous, honestly. I think right now it's mostly dangerous for the population that's in the, let's say, lower track. But over time, as that grows, and also dissatisfaction, frustration, all of these things, maybe we're seeing that our children are not getting better lives, and that's why we came here. It becomes increasingly dangerous for the upper track. I'm trying to do this in like a classless, let's not like say something horrible, but it really is a dual class society that's developing, and I've seen it develop in my own life and research more and more over time. And that was my question about just, like, what is a just solution? And, you know, it has to be just. I don't believe in anything that's ever just for everybody. Like, that to me is that feeling stops us from moving forward towards more justice or more just solutions in general, because we think, well, it's not going to be perfect, so I don't have to do anything. But I don't want to take all our time. I know we have musical stuff, but I do want to ask each one of you individually, and Fred, this actually spins off of what you said in your bio and previous discussions that you and I have had. And also, Catherine, what you said earlier about everybody has their own responsibility, right? Every single one of us right now has different realms of influence that we operate in, and some of those realms of influence may be more privileged than other realms of influence. Nonetheless, we're here. We're in a panel, like being in a panel and being able to address an audience. it gives you a certain realm of influence. So I would like to end this discussion on, in your own world, realm of influence, where do you see your passion for sustainability, however you describe that, leading you next? You know, where do you think it's going, and how do you plan to actualize that? You know, we all have lovely plans, but a plan or a goal without a plan is just a dream. So, like, how do you plan to actualize that? Laura, did you want to start?
Yeah, I can do that. Actually, so I was, if you haven't heard, like, what was happening at the United Nations this week, but they are actually adopting a groundbreaking pact for the future. And part of this, and since some of you mentioned children as such, in this pact there is a declaration on future generations. For me, this is really, really important because I'm teaching young people at the University of Iceland, and I'm also a mother and a grandmother, so really this is something that I think is really important. So we just in August published a paper. I published a paper together with my colleague, Professor Brynhildur Davíðsdóttir, where it's titled Proposed Paradigm Shift from Shareholders and Stakeholders to Future Successors. The future successors, we define them as those that will take over running businesses from current executives or managers, whether they are children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of all genders, or others who belong to future generations not currently running businesses. So this is what our line of thinking is, and we actually proposed a pathway for how to do this. We have a framework called the 12P frameworks for future successors. We have boundaries, which are the planetary health and boundaries, principles and philosophies that we need to follow, like sustainable development and so forth. We have business aspects in the model that is about purpose and policies of businesses. We talk about policies and priorities. We talk about paramountcy, meaning where the interest of future generations are put at the top. We talk about the processes, practices, and portfolios, but we also talk about leaders, and in this case we talk about bold and advanced leaders, because this is about people. This is also about passion. This is about what we call plunkiness, meaning like the courage also. We need the courage. And then the basic outcome is realized through partnership, which is also something that has been mentioned today. We also need to use pressure and power in this case in order to result in prosperity, profitability, and performance.
I admire your use of P. It's a good, bold, it's a bold consonant that wakes people up. And pluck is a great word too in there. I really like it. But Heather, I'm going to turn to you because that kind of spins up what you said about like thinking about future generations, though don't limit yourself to those previous comments. But for you moving forward with your new venture, you know, how do you see it playing out for you?
Yes, just one thing I want to mention also before the other discussion is that we also need to actively seek underrepresented people when we are hiring. And I think this is very crucial, is to change the hiring process. For us, towards sustainability, I think data is the crucial fact here. Because where we are going, how we set goals, is nothing if we don't know what's behind it. So for us, it's now like having statistics. Like we want to move the needle, we want to make the change, and we need to have the numbers behind it. It's not enough to say we want to do it. We are trying to do it. But to be sure that we can actually show that we are doing this. And our business is now actually seeking statistics to show our clients that here are the numbers. Here is what we are changing with our solution. And this is how we actually show how we are doing good for the future.
Freyr, I'm going to turn to you and your ideas of privilege and allyship. Like, what do you think moving forward?
Yeah. So I think, you know, obvious is like I'm the most privileged person in this panel, and one of few, I guess, in this entire room. I think, you know, and just the fact of, you know, just being able to say that is not something that everybody is even ready to do. And I remember being somebody who thought that it was enough just to be a good person, and just think about me, and I'm doing well. How can I be responsible for what other people like me are doing? And it just kind of ended there. And then I kind of got like blown up. Kind of, I had a little bit of a situation where I experienced at a company in the States where I just learned. Like I had a 20-year learning in 1 year or so, and I just broke down a number of walls, and I just came out of that and realizing, oh wait, actually, like I have the platform and I'm not using it, and it's irresponsible to not use it. And so I think the thing that I can do and I want to do is so I have this long experience of kind of one-on-one coaching and kind of group coaching, and I also have the experience of being a privileged man going through that journey. So I remember what it feels like to be there. And I think that there are a large number of men in Iceland that are there and just need someone to kind of show them the way, open the door, kind of step over. I think that also pays into what you were describing about the kind of two track there. So if I think I can work on at least on a one-on-one basis to get people to jump over, and see the world the way it is actually, and kind of join, like acknowledge their platform and attach it to mine, and so I do want to do something. I haven't really formulated it perfectly yet, but I want to do something more formal about that, not just write on LinkedIn. So.
Yeah. Never go for perfect. It's never achievable, and it stops you from moving forward. Just like the perfectly just option. Jeffrey, you want to chime in?
I think conversations like this are important, but also things like media and metrics like financial incentives, grants, things like this would also help to show what is there, what is available. So it's not necessarily simply what I can do, because I've seen many entrepreneurs doing things on their own without any assistance or any recognition, creating shows and conferences and things of that nature. So I think structurally, I think there needs to be more access to finances, more lowering the barriers to entry for businesses or entrepreneurs who want to enter. I think there's the tax laws and things of this nature are sometimes too convoluted for those. They get scared off maybe sometimes.
Wait, and you're saying that as an American?
No.
Have you seen? No. Have you seen our tax laws?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But but there are ways around that anyway.
Exactly.
So for me, it's just to participate more, and wherever I do have a voice, I always like to introduce people. Even the show production that I was involved with before COVID hit. We were really on our way, but then COVID hit. But we were all about connecting people, and once we did that, it almost organically started to spread and become more. People became more aware, especially the Icelandic companies that we were in contact with. A lot of great Icelandic business owners who were just so passionate about what they were doing, and their passion became our passion, and then our contacts in the United States were passionate about it, and it just kind of grew from there. So conversations are important, and media coverage for situations like Grace, and thank you, Grace, again, for being so forward-thinking about this. It's incredible. And there's a lot of that out there, but it needs the attention.
Yeah, in my head, I designed studies I would like to do. And one of them is media coverage of immigrant-run initiatives. What the heck is up with that? That's the only question I have right now. Because you bring up shows like Carlotta, who's an immigrant, just did a fashion show, and even Eliza, when she was First Lady, the coverage of her book was minimal here as compared to external, and it's just what is up with that? You know, but that's as far as my research question has gotten, because I'm just so flabbergasted by the whole thing. So I appreciate you bringing up media. But Catherine.
I'm not a massive planner. Apart from every January, you know, in the middle of the winter, of course, getting Christmas over and then planning my exit, you know, all my trips for the year so that I know that I'm not stuck on the island for the whole year. That's obviously really important. But
escaping the rock is your own goal.
I'm not a massive planner, but I do obviously believe that we have to create some future for our generations. I'm the mother of two children, and you know, it's super important that we just, you know, we do think about today. So, you know, if you'd have asked me 8 years ago, would I be, you know, an advocate speaking for people and raising voices and lifting people up to create a platform, to create more diversity in workplaces and all of those things, I would have told you there's not a chance in hell. This is the path that I've been taken because, you know, Fred talked about him being privileged, but I also recognize I'm a privileged immigrant here. You know, I'm white, I'm European, I'm English speaking. I could pass as a typical Icelander and all of those things. So what I've chosen to do with my privilege is to, you know, create a platform to help raise up, you know, people who don't often get a voice as much as perhaps I do. And I'm using that platform to go into businesses and teach and educate people on how important it is to create this very inclusive environment, because we see way too much tokenism in Iceland as well. So when we are trying to diversify our teams, we're just like, oh, let's just add this person because, you know, they're gay or because they're black or because they're this. And what we're not doing is actually creating an inclusive environment first. And if we don't create that inclusive environment, then we're going to lose that talent. It costs money, it costs resources, it costs engagement, you know, happiness levels, all of those things. So, you know, businesses have to focus first and foremost on creating a very inclusive environment. That comes first before we start adding any diversity. And so just, you know, my kind of footprint here, and, you know, as I said, if you've asked me 8 years ago, would I be sitting at this stage talking about this, I would have just been, what are you, crazy? Because in London, I never had to talk about this. I was a global HR director, and we never had to have the diversity conversation in the way that we have it here. So, you know, I've chosen to take this path and kind of utilize my voice and my allyship to, you know, really create some change where we can. So, you know, that's my kind of stamp. But, you know, if we have the conversations now and we act now and we have a choice about whether we act now and we create inclusive environments, then that's the future that we're leaving, because it will become the norm like it is in other countries. It will become the norm that inclusivity, diversity is just part of our teams. We don't even have to question it in the future. So if we're educating people now, then that will hopefully leave the stamp for the future.
Can I add something? One last,
yes.
I promise.
Go ahead.
I think because it's very interesting, because as a female founder, and Halla mentioned it before, I mean, we are struggling with getting funding just because we are women for some reason, I don't know why. But I think very interesting talk I had with one investor, male investor, who said, like, I'm, you know, focusing now on investing more in women. And I thought, like, that's great. And investing in people, of course, you know, people I connect with. But when I invest in you, you are the future. You are the one who's going to make the change. It's not me, because you're paying it forward. And I think this is really interesting when you think about it, is that we are making the change in the end. And we need to make sure that we pay it forward. That we, later on, I'm going to invest in women.
Definitely.
I think we need to end there, because I know there's a musical act and chance for us to mingle after this. I hope that you have gotten something out of this panel, and I would like to thank our panelists for being so candid and open with what you had to share today. But I hope you also can think now about sustainability in a broad way on those levels of environmental, social, and economic. And also think a little bit critically about your fields of influence and where can you step into sometimes uncomfortable discussions that are worth having and getting used to this discomfort to have them. And so I invite you all also to, you know, come up and ask somebody, talk to us afterward as we mingle. If somebody used a word you don't understand, like tokenism, great word, maybe you don't know what that is and you want to get more information. get over that shyness and get over those feelings of discomfort and just come ask, right? And come talk to us about what we've said and about the, experiences that we've had. I believe Grace wants to say a few final words before, so I'm going to turn the podium back over to her and ask the panelists to find a seat so you're not up here afterwards.
If we could start by just taking a photo with the panelists, the Icelandic team, a photo with the panelists, and then we can welcome our beautiful guests. Our panelists and facilitator. Oh, okay. And facilitator.
Do you want to shift so that the banner's in the back?
I will make sure that you're all good, and then I'll make sure that the banners are used. Pass that forward. Yeah. Yes, please. Can you come a little bit in between ladies next? Yeah, I was really happy hiding behind. Yeah, I was like, wait a minute. Tommy's hair was like right in my right nostril.
Thank you for the amazing insights that you gave us, our dear panelists. We want to welcome our musical guest, Heather Ragnars. And as she makes her way and sets up, I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists. I know each of you individually. I want to say that Heidrun was my first mentor when I started my business, Heidrun Osk, and she's still my mentor to this day. And I'm so grateful for all the advice you've given me and how you've stood by me all this time. Thank you so much. I want to thank Fred because I met Fred through LinkedIn. He posted about his desire for allyship, and that I posted on his one of his posts on LinkedIn. And I just want to thank you for your courage to step forward and being that voice that champions men to be also part of the conversation. I also want to thank Catherine Gunnarsson. I think, Catherine and I, we have similar ideas. We just get along so well. I think, Catherine, we must find something to disagree on. This is not healthy. But anyway, as they say, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. So let's leave it at that. So grateful for you. Jeff, I'm so grateful that you were able to be here with us. Actually, I went to, because Jeff is a photographer, and I wanted to talk to him about photography. But once we had the conversation, I knew he had to be a panelist. Thank you for coming. Did I forget anybody? And thank you, Randy Stevens, for your great facilitation. So grateful for you. And and Gunnar, I want to thank you for being our photographer of the day. I want to thank our makeup artists. I don't really think I have I don't remember all their names, but we thank you so much, and we thank our sponsors, Olgirden, for providing us with the drinks, and for everybody. Now it's our time to mingle, talk, and while we listen to the musical performance by Heather Ragnars. Thank you very much for coming.
I see the way you talk to me. You listen first and then you speak. You appreciate my mind, that's hard to find. You better stay on your side of this car. I'm here for conversation, nothing more. You wouldn't dare complain. We've always wanted different things, but we've always wanted each other. Each other. I see you start to reach for me. That's why we must meet publicly. 'Cause the tension here could be cut with the knife. My baby is imagining the worst this time, it's happening. And the burden of this choice, it's all mine. You better stay right there where you are. The choice is mine, it's not your fault. You wouldn't dare insist. We've always wanted different things, but we've always wanted each other. Each other. I won't see you again. I want to, but I'll refrain, 'cause we've always wanted each other. How do you know it's right when no one truly does? How do you know what to believe when they're all tricking us? If you've been deceived before, how can you know it's love? If you can't afford your car, why don't you take the bus? Is it right to remember things can change in a second? Then it only cause a rush. If you don't trust yourself alone with someone, is it alright that they make you blush? It hurts the most to choose. It hurts. the debts for money that you spend to live. Try to find your perfect match and always criticize. Do you think you'll end up all alone or that you'll get it right? Improve your outsides to upsize. What's wrong with your present life? They tell you that is out there, so you take a mirror, you take a stare. Is this what's passed by you? It hurts the most to lose. How do you play it safe when you want to be dangerous? How do you go both ways when you want to spend your time with your love? How